Welcome back to the Tailosive Tech Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We're trying something a little bit different today. What are we doing, Mike? What's happening?
Well, as video viewers can see, there is no Randy here with us right now, but he will be here later. Unfortunately, it comes at the sacrifice of Drew having to leave. It's not because they hate each other. It's not because that they got in an argument about the R3 and R2 and which one's better.
I hate Randy. That's why we have to be distanced now on the podcast. But he's in this very podcast that you're listening to right now. You just have to wait a little bit longer, and then we'll get his thoughts, because there was a new MacBook that dropped, probably one he feels relatively interested in, but because he was a big fan of the M1 Air. So we didn't want one of us to miss, and scheduling wise, it was like, well, either I can record now or Randy can record later. And Mike was the clever one who suggested, let's do a split episode. But once again, Mike, you are the one constant. You're the only thing that stays here the whole time.
You can't get rid of me. I'm always here.
Somehow.
Even those people that just don't want me here anymore, which I don't know who's saying that. If you are, sorry, I'm still here. But
he's keeping this show together, by the way. Randy and I keep terrorizing the whole podcast. And Mike's the glue keeping our shenanigans and chaos held together. So thank you, Mike.
I'll take all of that and more for all that, what's it called? The blame? No, the
credit.
The responsibility? Credit. That's what it is, the credit.
You may have the credit. It's well deserved. It's well earned.
Speaking of also that connecting tissue, I'm also the one, I think, in the three of us that owns the topic for today's podcast, which is the M3 MacBook Air, in which I only have the M1, and it's specifically a certified refurbished one. But I'm still using it, even though right now I'm recording on 14 Pro connected to my studio, and then I'm usually looking at the studio display right here. I've got
Shabuya.
The Air
Tech roll call. Name all the
let me
products.
just flex my muscles. Let me just tell you everything I own. $1 billion and a Ferrari. And
I'm guessing not the M3 Air.
Not the M3 Air, in which I didn't realize it until this announcement for the M3 Air, that the M2 Air, I believe, if I'm correct, you can fact check me.
I will.
That brought back the MagSafe
yes.
connector to the Air lineup, in which I didn't realize that until the M3. And I thought, oh, the M3 got the MagSafe connector. That's weird. Why didn't the M2, even though they look pretty much the same?
That's how small the differences are. That it's not insane for you to get the two confused.
Well, that's where I was trying to figure out what are the differences between the M2 and the M3 in this whole lineup.
Very, very small. Very little differences. That was my main question I wanted to pick your brain on. Because I got some backlash. I don't know if I would use the term a lot of backlash, but basically in the morning, way before I was ready to start work, they dropped the M3 MacBook Air. And I was like, whoa, I didn't think this was going to happen. So I read up on it, made sure I understood all of the changes and all of the differences, which wasn't that hard because there were very little. And I just went to the compare page and scrolled. And I was like, these are so similar. So I said, okay, I don't need to do like a big, exciting announcement video where I say, guys, it's here, check it out. I said, no, the narrative of this video is, this is not worth it. Do not buy this, especially because Apple is still selling the M2 MacBook Air for $100 cheaper new, but because the M2 Air has been around for a while, I would suggest don't buy it brand new. If a product has been around for a while, you should hunt around for some deals. Best Buy was selling M2 Airs brand new in the box for like $850, making it like $250 to $300 cheaper than the brand new M3 Air. So I was just like, nobody should buy this. There's no reason to get the M3 Air. Do you think that's unfair of me to say no one should buy it, or do you agree?
Well, considering that I just did the same thing that you said in regards to looking at the compare page and trying to find the differences and finding that there's pretty much none.
I can summarize them for you. I bet I could do it in less than 30 seconds if you timed me. Less than 15
I'll get it
seconds.
right on my watch. All right, you're on the clock in 3, 2, 1.
It has a 3-nanometer architecture, and you can plug in multiple external monitors, assuming the lid is closed. And the midnight color is less fingerprinty. Is that
it?
Is that my time? What am I at?
That was 15 seconds.
Yes.
I think. Yeah. What I could find is that it's got bigger unified memory,
Does it?
More unified memory. It does.
Where did you see that?
It goes up to. That's compared to the M1.
Yes.
That's my problem. Is I'm comparing to M1, which is what I own. Compared to M2.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the
totally
exact same storage and RAM configurations, exact same battery life, exact same CPU and GPU core, exact same display. People were getting mad at me, but their counter argument was literally making stuff up. That was funny to me. So they said, Drew, I can't believe you would say no one should buy it. This is the 3-nanometer architecture. It's more efficient. It has better battery life.
It has hardware accelerated ray tracing.
Yes.
That's definitely worth, I think it's $100 more, right?
Well, if you buy it the dumb way, in my opinion, but yeah.
The dumb way.
If you buy it brand new from Apple, a product that's been around for over a year now, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
If you're buying a brand new Apple product that's been out for a long time, you will find it cheaper on Amazon or Apple Refurbished or Best Buy or wherever. And you can still buy them brand new at these other places. It's not like I'm forcing you to buy used, but yeah,
It does also come with voice isolation and wide spectrum microphone modes, which enhances voice clarity in audio and video calls, which I think for what we do, you, me, and Randy, it makes sense, at least for me, if I was in the market for a MacBook Air, that would influence me a little bit more. But considering that our iPhones that we have, which are pretty recent iPhones, have pretty good cameras and microphones, you might be able to get around it if you've got a new phone or a new iPhone, I guess.
Yeah, I'm basically, for those who are unaware, I'm recording my audio with the 16-inch MacBook Pro from 2021 with the M1 Pro chip, and I just pulled that up in the compare page as well. It does not claim to have the voice isolation and wide spectrum microphone modes or the enhanced voice clarity thing. I think the mics still sound great. So, I mean, the MacBook Pro is listed as studio quality 3-mic array, whereas the MacBook Air M2 and M3 both say 3-mic array. They don't say studio quality, so maybe that's the big difference. But I just think that the difference is probably so small. If you're the kind of person that's asking for advice on which MacBook to buy, you're the kind of person that would not notice the difference between these two. So it's a spec bump for a machine that's not about specs. Like, you buy the Air because it's like the cheapest, lightest Mac OS equipped device. You don't buy the Air for the ray tracing, you know? Like, at least I don't think, if you care about hardware accelerated ray tracing, you're not buying a fanless, thin and light cheap Mac. I think if you're the kind of person that wants 3D modeling and ray tracing, you're going to buy a Pro or a Mac Studio. Is that unfair for me to say?
I don't think so. I was thinking, what if you tried cross-shopping those two? Because there's cross-shopping what I've got and what the new MacBook Air is, and then there's comparing that to what you have. And even on certified refurbished, the price difference isn't even the same ballpark. It's $1,000 more to get what you have still on certified refurbished. I'm sure you can find it.
No, I wouldn't cross-shop with my MacBook.
Yeah. So I don't think it's unfair. I think Apple's in a very sticky situation right now where they're trying to figure out how to make their products a little bit more exciting, especially after, and that's something that we've talked about in the podcast as well, trying to make this podcast a little more exciting post Vision Pro, where Vision Pro was this huge boulder in a lake that made huge waves. and now there's just not much water in the lake.
This is like you're right though. You're right. It's totally a cold splash in the face of like, okay, here's everything else going on at Apple. It's kind of ironic that this was announced right after the whole Vision Pro hype died down. It's like, okay, remember that big conversation we had about, will this replace the blah blah blah? Will this take over the world? Are everybody gonna wear these? How will this go mainstream? Drastic whiplash as we cut to, oh yeah, here's a new chip in the same exact design. Moving on. It's like, oh, this is it. This is all we have coming other than Vision Pro.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. The colors I don't really jive with too much either with the new
They're exactly
13
the same
inch.
too.
Well, as the last one, yeah. And I kind of like my rose gold looking one a bit too much. The Starlight isn't bad. I've got that on the iPad, which I don't think is in the room today. It went off to go do some errands, I guess. But
I'd
the
still
Starlight isn't a
recommend
bad color.
yours.
Oh, yeah, I hard agree. The M1 MacBook Air does more than enough, even though it has, 8 gigabytes of RAM or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
so do the new
still
ones.
a perfectly capable machine for what I use it for, whether it's editing videos or just browsing the web and all that. It doesn't need to be the fastest machine ever. And to be fair, I think you also put the M2 through its paces with your workload, and you didn't really find any issues with it. So I think...
Other than the podcast it lost because it overheated.
Well, that was the M1, right?
No, that was the M2. That was like right when it came out.
Maybe it's the... What'd you test then?
That was it, I'm pretty sure. I remember because it was like the
Maybe
midnight one, and OBS kept saying, encoding overloaded, and then it like corrupted the file and erased the entire podcast. But it didn't happen with the M1, ironically. And I know because you were using the M1 Air on your trip to record the podcast for like months.
The only time it had an issue was on a podcast that we lost sometime in, I think, June or July. And that was because it was 110 degrees and I was recording in a truck where it was even hotter in the truck.
It overheated,
So
but it wasn't the chip's fault. It was the sun's
No, it was
fault.
definitely my fault for putting the machine in a very hot truck and trying to record. And even so, I was sweating like a pig to where I was dehydrated by the end of it. My wife looked at me and said, "What are you doing?"
But yeah, shortly after that, you just said, okay, I'm just going to record from in the trailer where it's air conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was fine. You recorded many episodes with that thing.
Yeah, I think maybe that only benefit then would be having some of that voice isolation software helping you out, because that was one big concern I had on that road trip was the noise, whether it's being near a highway in the trailer or the air conditioning or the dogs moving around or my wife moving around. That would be ambient noise that would cause just not the best audio quality for the podcast. And so having that ability with, I guess, only unlocked through the M3 chip in the MacBook Air might be worth it if you're more into recording stuff on your computer, whether it's podcasts or music or vocals or anything like that, and you're trying to go as budget as possible. It might be that niche product. I just don't think it's the one to go for if you're trying to go for the bare minimum that you need for your use cases. And typically you can most likely get by with how I've been getting by with the MacBook Air M1 and an iPhone. And you'll most likely capture everything that you can with decent quality and do everything that you need to do without many problems.
What about the argument of software support? A lot of people bring that up. Just spend the extra $200 or whatever to get an extra year or two of software support long term. Does that sway you?
That's a good question. It depends. I've always been neither here nor there on the software support bandwagon, mainly because I guess I haven't until recently been able to purchase these devices, these very expensive devices. In the past, I defaulted to a Surface, a Microsoft Surface, tablet. for school, and then after that, I upgraded to the iMac, which is an upgrade, Drew.
Yeah.
And then to the studio, but only recently I was able to purchase Mac devices after being a student and all that. So I'm still trying to figure out whether I weigh that more heavily or not in my ecosystem, or at least in my daily life, if I want that software support or not. I'd probably push more towards not as much, because the computer is still doing, or whatever the device is doing what I need it to do. Do I really need whatever comes out in, I don't know, Mac OS Weed or anything like that?
That's the distant
most likely not.
2030 Mac OS generation we keep. Eventually,
or 2040, because then you turn it around, or be dyslexic within. There you go. But
I agree with you, because usually if your Mac is 5-6 years old anyway, you're not getting most of the new features that Apple announces at WWDC. Usually it's like, well, you're on the like second class, third class generation of MacBooks, which means you get the new wallpaper and like some new iMessage perks or something, but you don't get like the headlining new feature, whatever that will be. And I don't think, especially with Macs, it matters as much about like software support, because on our laptops and desktops, we tend to use browsers more than apps. So it's like, as long as you're running a somewhat recent version of Safari or Chrome, your websites and everything will continue to work. Whereas on a phone, there's a lot of individual app. Here's the Messenger app. Here's the YouTube app. Here's the Tesla app. And those start to get outdated if you don't get that extra year of support. And then I try to phrase it inversely, like, okay, what if you get 5-6 years down the road and Apple says, we'll give you access to these little features, like, I don't know, some new notification animation, some new iMessage integration feature. We'll give you those if you pay us an additional $200. Would you do it? Would you pay $200 for those little slightly more up-to-date, hey, it's running the latest version? Would you pay $200 to unlock it? I bet most people would say no. Most people would be like, I don't really need those that badly. So why would you pay it now?
Right. And also it runs the risk of, if it actually is a meaningful feature or tool that is a little bit more taxing on your dated hardware, who knows if it will actually run reliably or not.
Yeah.
Or at least as smoothly.
True.
As compared to just buying a new one, or selling what you got.
That's a good
and
point.
Then buying something new at pretty much a not discounted price, but you got some money in your pocket from the sale of your previous device. So it's, I've never, I was alive during the time where I believe you had to buy software with,
Yep.
or was it the new updates with Apple?
Right.
Because I do recall my mother having to buy, was it Snow Leopard or
I remember
Lion
that too.
or
It was like
else?
$20 or $60 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. In which I didn't think anything of it,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because at that time, everything pretty much was in that bulky cardboard box or whatever. On like, you go into, I don't know, it was Target, Walmart, Best Buy, or something else, some old store at that time, and you'd grab it off the shelf, scan it, and then you'd take it home, and it's a couple discs that you have to put in. So it's actual hardware that you're having to buy.
It was physical.
In which it made sense at the time, because we didn't have the system set up that we have today for being able to send
over the
on
air
a consumer level over the air updates, where back then it made much more sense to send out discs, in which discs were the huge thing back in the day. So I think that justification makes sense for sending out discs, but these days I find it, and I attribute it more towards subscriptions than I do just a purchase, where you're having to pay a bit more for something that used to be free, especially with how streaming services are dealing with it these days. Like Prime, where I used to be able to watch everything without ads, and now I have to pay an extra $3 to watch something without ads. It's just
horrible,
slightly aggravating. And so that's why I'm I push away from it, or I push against it, or I try not to think about it because I don't want that reality to happen again where we have to pay for software updates. But if it comes to it where Apple doesn't need to get more revenue, but it seems like if they need to justify better upgrades in their new Mac OS update or system update or whatever like that, then I guess it makes sense if that means that all that money is going towards a better quality update rather than what seems like what you were describing before. Oh, you get a new wallpaper, 1 or 2 new features, and that's basically it. There's nothing revolutionary or different or new besides maybe a slightly different look and feel.
As someone who runs Sonoma on my old iMac Pro, I can attest that you shouldn't be making buying decisions based on the handful of features you get after 5 to 6 years. So my point is, like, sure, maybe the M3 gets 1 year longer support or 2 years longer than the M2, but the feature differences at that time are going to just be so small. I don't think you would pay an extra $200 for those features. But I don't know. Apple needs their money.
Pay an extra $200. Paying an extra $200 just sounds amazing. I mean, in this day and age, compared to just getting a free update, like, I feel like at that point you'd get a noticeable percentage of people switching back over to Windows or something else.
Measurable amount. I don't know.
I would think so.
I hate Windows quite a bit, but Apple needs their revenue, Mike. You know, the European Union cracking down on them. They're gonna have to allow default navigation apps to be set, default browsers over there. But thankfully, if you leave the EU, it all stops working. The phone can tell when you've left the European Union. I'm not joking, by the way. This is a real story.
This is insane. The EU has more power than anyone would give them credit. Yeah. In regards to any changes that happen at Apple, you'd think, oh, maybe some group of managers or engineers in the ranks at Apple would have more decisions to contribute to the company and steer it in the direction that they want. No, it's all this government entity pushing them in the way that they want, which stuff like that with like iMessage and all that, where it was a threat, but then wasn't a threat once Apple said, we'll do RCS or whatever, and then who knows if that's coming this year or not.
It better.
It's just... Yeah.
I'm sick of all these SMS issues. I'm in a lot of group chats, more than I would like to be a part of, and I just keep getting roped into them, and then I keep getting the whole liked this message, laughed this message, and people will add them while I'm in the middle of streaming or working or something, and suddenly my iMessage has like 40 messages, and I'm like, oh, guys, please.
You think something happened, and then you look at the messages, and it's just laughed, liked,
right.
laughed.
I want to be nice to people, but at the same time, I'm like, don't do the reactions if we're on SMS mode. That's just weird. But when you're on Android, Google fixes it for you. Like they see those messages and then they add them. So if you're on an Android, you don't know that's happening. So the iOS person just... It literally forces you to be a jerk. That's what it does. Apple's banking on you being mean to your friends.
Well, yeah, mainly because it's been coded in that particular format. And to Apple's credit, makes total sense if you made something really good and you want people to come over to your walled garden and stay inside so that way they can keep on selling you a whole bunch of stuff.
Peer pressure. Come on. Peer pressure.
Yeah, it makes more sense to peer pressure the competition to either come over to your side or, I would think, help develop something that's even better on their end, so then that way you're driving competition. But instead, it's more become a social, I guess, issue.
When you run out of competitive features, you just have to get
a social inconvenience, I guess. It becomes a social experiment.
Yeah, it really is. Well, we might have new stuff coming in the remainder of the month. Is there anything in regards to the rumors surrounding the new iPad Airs, which includes a bigger size for the first time, the OLED ultra thin iPad Pros or the new Apple Pencil, anything you're like, that's not going to happen or that is going to happen? Like any
So
final predictions?
I tend to not keep up with all these leaks and all the stuff that you either respond to. It's funny because I've filtered everything down to who I'm following and everything else on Twitter to where all I see is you, and then sometimes you make a random tweet that it seems random. It's set or in reality you're responding to a general audience's reaction to either a leak or someone's opinion.
Oh, okay. I see
in
what
which
you're saying.
I don't see that directly. I see it indirectly through what you're tweeting. Just like, no, this is actually a perfectly fine product for these reasons. And I think, what happened?
What a myth.
The most recent one was either a patent or something else, or some thing got leaked about 3 buttons being put on the. I don't have my iPhone. Oh, it's recording. 3 buttons being put on one side of the iPhone, like the action button, and I guess the volume.
Yeah.
Or it's like there's a whole bunch more buttons allegedly coming to the iPhone 16 Pro, most likely.
Yeah.
In which I'm not too sure. You might have to remind me. So one is the action button. That's
you got it.
I think it's just supposed to be
It's
the
just
action button. The second one's
two
supposed to be
volume buttons.
the weird camera one on the other side.
Yeah, power and camera would be on this side, and then volume and action button on this side.
Okay, I feel like
kind of
that
where
might
this
be more
ultra
discernible to
wideband
me.
antenna is. That's basically. So it won't
Okay.
look that different, honestly. It'll pretty much look like this, except this
I guess
instead
where
of an
my
antenna is a
concern-
button.
Yeah, where my concern is rooting from is reaching into my pocket and grabbing my phone, and then either accidentally hitting these buttons, which then launches
Pressing
into a
8
menu that I
buttons at
don't
the
want.
same time.
Yeah, I feel like we're adding a bit too many buttons to the side of this phone. Even though I think buttons are good, like I've mentioned in podcasts before, I think there is a middle ground where there's most likely enough buttons on the device already, and that's where software has to come and meet in the middle for fluid and logical transitions and usage for the device between human and computer. But with this, I'm feeling like we're going over the edge on this rope pulling, where we're getting a bit too many tactile feedback features on the side of it.
It might be somewhat recessed, though, kind of like this, where it's the type of button you don't even feel because it just blends in with the chassis. So that might help with accidental presses. So you launch it with this action button, and then you control the camera with this button. I don't know. I think they'll have a software solution, kind of like how the dynamic island surprised us with how well integrated it is. I think they'll have some cool camera perks that come from the iPhone has a trackpad now. it's just like the MacBook Air.
It's funny because I was thinking of something like that, like the back of the phone. I get we've got the MagSafe back there, and other stuff, but I feel like we could do something else at the back of the phone. One thing I really loved about my Pixel 2 XL was the finger scanner on the back for unlocking or I guess just unlocking.
Yep, I remember
the device. And so I think if we're running out of things to do with the iPhone, something like that would be interesting to integrate for certain usages. And that might be contradicting my whole spiel before of I think we're adding too many things to the surface of this device.
They can't stop. They can't just go, we couldn't think of anything. So, just keep buying it, please.
Imagine. That would be a great either like an April Fool's or SNL skit type of thing if Tim Cook ever wanted to get into a little bit more comedic
He'd be
entertainment.
good at it. Yeah, he could do it.
There's a lot of funny bits that he could do.
Mother
for
Nature.
his mannerisms.
I love seeing him act in those stupid skits. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. He seems like a very fun, genuine guy, but also it seems like Apple is somewhat grasping at straws on what to integrate next, just by seeing what's going on right now with throwing the MacBook Air M3 out there, and there's not too many differences.
Didn't even update the
Or
wallpaper. It's the same exact wallpaper as the M2.
how are we gonna live, Drew?
I don't know. I just thought that was a small thing that they used to change between chip upgrades, so that on the compare page, the new one would look noticeable. Even if the design was identical, they would change the wallpaper so you could be like, oh yeah, that's the M3 Pro. This is the M2 Pro. They changed the wallpaper. Not even with this. It's the exact same icon, exact same wallpaper, probably exact same packaging.
It's the same wallpaper for the three devices that I've got on the compare page right now of the M3 Air, the M1 Air, and your MacBook, the M1 Pro,
Oh
16-inch.
So I guess the
that
compare
might just be a
page
slight difference.
locks them all. But in the old days, when they released a new one, they would market it with different. Like I remember when the MacBook Pro with the 3 nanometer chip came out, they had a different wallpaper from the M2, which had a different wallpaper from the M1. It's like
Sure.
they're basically, I think they're experimenting with how insanely small of an upgrade can we get away with now. Let's see how little changes we can think of.
Do you think there's hopefully a bigger change hardware wise that's coming on the horizon? Maybe not externally, but internally. Because I feel like there was talks of Apple going with Intel or someone else for some features or something like that. Maybe it's not Intel. Maybe it's someone else.
I don't think they will switch to another silicon provider, even if a silicon provider surpassed them. It would just be such a weird look to be like, we're on Apple Silicon. Actually, now we're transitioning to someone else because they did a better job. Like Apple would rather stick with their crappier chips as long as they're the ones making them. But there has been...
I guess what I'm thinking of...
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was thinking gaming is something that the M chips aren't... Or I guess Mac OS isn't really optimized for. So maybe adding another chip in there, just like how Vision Pro has the M2 and R1 chips in it. Maybe a separate chip, either supported by Intel or whoever else, that works with the M2 chip for gaming type or CAD-like uses would make sense in a future upgrade for maybe not the Airs, but the Pros.
I mean, it sounds marketable. I think they'd like the idea of like, this one has more power because it includes the G1 chip or whatever they call it. But I
the
still
gamer chip.
Anything gaming or 3D modeling related, I'm always like, it's not a hardware issue. Like these chips they're already shipping have hardware accelerated ray tracing. They have very fast read and write speeds. They have great CPUs. They have great displays. They're perfectly capable of running flagship games. It's just a game dev optimization problem. So my point is it'd be marketable, but it probably wouldn't change much because it doesn't matter how good it is at running a certain game. If that's not the game you want to play, people aren't going to buy it. And I don't think the gaming community wants to buy Macs, even if they were 10 times better. They don't like the brand. They don't like that they can't work on it. They don't like the designs because they're not RGB or whatever. They like their exclusive titles. That's what people buy games. They don't buy consoles and then hope that their games they like are on them. You know, they're like, I want to play Halo, so I'm buying an Xbox. I want to play Spider-Man, so I'm buying a PlayStation. I want to play Zelda, so I'm buying a Switch. It's like the game comes first. The hardware is second. Here's what you have to pay to get access to that game, but unless Apple came up with some exclusive contract with another game dev, I don't think much would change. But
so you were mentioning earlier before I cut you off on some other company reportedly collaborating with Apple on either some internal hardware or something like that.
Oh, well, I haven't heard of any collaborations with another company, but there have been a lot of rumors about lately, for some reason, Ming-Chi Kuo was talking about it, that there's still the only folding device Apple's continuing development on is not an iPhone or an iPad, but a 20-inch Mac that's just a big, giant folding screen. So it's like a MacBook that's all screen all the way. I don't see that going anywhere. I'm sure there's a prototype, but I was like, that's the only big, in regards to big hardware change with Mac, that I could possibly see them doing, but it's a stretch. It's definitely a stretch. I mean, I guess I could visualize them saying, well, we're already using a trackpad, so what if you just continued the screen going? Maybe there's a little accessory that flips up so you still have some kind of tactile feedback, but I don't know. It sounds like one of those moonshot projects that is going to get vetoed, like the Apple car, where they just go, this is too hard.
Yeah, I recalled some other company making a dual screen, just like a Microsoft Surface Duo laptop, in which that was Lenovo with the Yoga Book, in which very hilarious name, in my opinion.
Never seen anyone get one.
I think I've only seen one in the wild once.
Okay.
And I don't even recall where, but I do vaguely recall seeing a 2-screen laptop and I wonder how that feels trying to type on it. You might need a Bluetooth keyboard to attach to it as well, and then at that point, I guess you just have a really elongated screen. It pretty much becomes the Samsung Flip.
Yes,
I believe. Yeah. But now you've got a keyboard with it. So
it's like, okay, it's cool that it can do that, but what does that unlock? What is that gonna do differently? Not much. Maybe a really good book mode. You hold it sideways like a book, and then you turn the pages. Wow.
That would be for someone who I've been reading a whole bunch of manga and comics recently. Having a little bit more screen real estate would be great. That can compact a bit more. So lugging around like the big iPad Pro that I inherited from my grandma, I don't really want to put that everywhere. I don't want to have it take up my whole nightstand.
That's the biggest iPad ever. By the way, audience, he's referring to the 2017 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which was the big screen and the big bezels. It's massive.
Right. And so having that on my nightstand isn't really the best real estate for putting other things on there, like my phone.
That could be your nightstand. It's that big.
It could be. Let's just make a nightstand that's all one screen, and then if I want to do anything on it, I have to crank my neck down and then tap on it and hope that it registers.
The nightstand is your alarm system. You just slap the whole
The
screen.
Nightstand Pro.
Why are we making nightstand accessories, guys? Let's just make a nightstand. Why not?
Apple just needs to get into the home device network a little bit more for all these different accessories that we got here in our home. Who cares about speakers and all that, or Apple TVs? Let's invest in
I agree.
The Apple nightstand.
Unironically, I think it'd be cool to see them go in different directions instead of more chip upgrades like this, because this is...
I'm thinking that's where we're at. I'm feeling like either if it's Tim Cook's type of regime, maybe not regime is the right word, that makes him sound like a dictator, but the like way that he's handling the company might need to, when he moves on and then the new CEO comes in, maybe that's when we get the more creative, a little bit more Google-esque in terms of niche but weird but interesting products that maybe don't last that long but are supported by maybe not Mac OS but Home OS or whatever.
Yes. That's been leaked.
Something like that would be interesting to me, so that way we're not in this rut, and not specifically saying you and me talking about the lack of stuff to talk about, in which there's plenty of stuff to talk about, but feeling like Apple is kind of grinding to a halt in regards to exciting new things besides Vision Pro, in which even then it's only Gen 1, and we're still waiting on a whole bunch of different things for that to become a little bit more exciting, at least from my perspective and experience.
Yeah.
But branching out into different devices, it might not yield great results overall for each way that you go, but it might sum up to an interesting ecosystem that people might give more of a try and bring more people into your ecosystem, just because you've got the, I don't know, Apple hair dryer to rival the was it not Nikon, the oh goodness, the what's that one hair dryer? Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
If you couldn't tell, I don't put a lot of time into my hair. But
It's not Philips. It's what's the
if
fan
Apple
that you
made
keep
one.
on making fun of with the Rivian headlights?
Dyson.
The
Oh yeah.
Dyson.
Dyson
The
makes
Dyson
fancy
hairdryer.
stuff. They're definitely the Apple of air movement. They do
Quite
vacuums
literally.
and fans. But yeah, I'm all for it. I want to see them do something. But is there anything else you want to talk about before we hand it off to Randy?
You hand off the baton to Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Not much. I would say apologies, audience, for having a weird segmented podcast, but I think this will be a very unique one. In which, with that, I'm about to throw down a smoke bomb and turn Drew into Randy right now. So, do you have any last thoughts?
That's it. But whatever Randy says, he's wrong.
All right.
He sucks.
Wha-pa-pow! All right, I think it worked.
Where am I? Who are you people?
We talked about this, Randy. We're doing the podcast in segments this week.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
because
having trouble controlling the volume of my voice.
You're just making so much work for the editor, which is not me for this one, thankfully. But Randy, nice to have you. I appreciate you making time for this week, and totally seamless / unseamless transition from Drew to you. Nothing has changed, obviously. I totally did not change from a yellow shirt to a blue shirt in that amount of time. But here we are.
I thought about putting on the clothes from last night's podcast, but no. Well, I guess we could talk about Turk.
Right. So I already got Drew's thoughts on the M3 MacBook Air. I wanted to hear about yours, Randy, especially as someone who worked off of it, but not that one, the M1, and thought it was a fantastic machine, but then decided to upgrade to the M1 Pro later.
Well, it's what you expect the upgrade cycle to kind of be. I'm not shocked. I'm not let down. I'm not overwhelmed, underwhelmed, or whelmed. It's what I expected, because at this point you're not messing with you're sticking with what works. And the M1 MacBook Pros came with the redesign, and since then everything kind of followed that design aesthetic. So I expected the new MacBook Airs to look how they do, have the same colors. I expected literally all of it. It was the most unanticipated thing. So I see it as power of the course. I don't hate it. It's not for me, obviously, because I still got my M1 Pro, but as someone who had the M1 MacBook Air, I love that thing. So in a universe where if that Randy was in existence today, actually he'd probably still get the Pro, but assuming I didn't have Pro money, then for $1,000, if I can make this $1,000 work, I can see myself getting an M3 MacBook Air. I keep hoping, if there is a letdown, it's not that of what the specs are on this thing, because it's the entry model price. So assuming Drew's going to say what he says about I wasn't here to hear what he had to say, but I already know how he feels about it.
You know Drew too well.
Yeah, I do. So assuming what he says, putting that to the side, because no, I would say my letdown or my disappointment, I keep hoping to get that 15-inch MacBook, just the regular old MacBook. Wait, was it 15? No, it's 12-inch. The 12-inch MacBook. Anyway,
the 15 is already offered right now, but I was assuming that you meant like a regular. Well, what I was assuming is that we've got the Airs and the Pros, but there's nothing in between anymore.
I want the MacBook from 2015. It was just MacBook with one USB-C port. Upgrade that to be a Thunderbolt, so you can plug it in and have all these other IOs accessible to you, like say the Studio Display that I'm using right now. And then instead of an Intel chip, slap a good old M3 in there, and everybody that I know in my personal life who is aware of that old slim design factor from the MacBook wants that with the new Apple Silicon, and myself included.
Right.
And I guess you too.
In which, yeah, I love my M1 MacBook Air in rose gold. It's been fantastic. I mentioned that with Drew But one thing that did strike unique to me with the M3 is that it apparently has some type of, how do you describe it? Voice isolation and wide spectrum microphone modes, in which would be nice for our line of, I guess, hobby being podcasting. So that way it's isolating the voice a little bit more and you're not getting any of the ambient noise that both of our microphones tend to do. From me editing the podcast, it's something that I found with Drew's MacBook Pro. It's fantastic because it doesn't really capture anything else besides maybe him clicking on the mouse pad a little bit. And so to have that voice isolation is something that I found in the editing process, and then also maybe the listening process as well, to be something that's a little bit more worth it, in my opinion. But that would mean the only reason I would get an M3 is if my M1 MacBook Air went kaput and I needed a laptop. But I'm no longer in a position where I need it. It's more of an accessory now because of the position I'm in. And I thought it was great for the experience that I had it on, which was road tripping around. And it's great to use right now, but I don't think I'm in the position for an M3 MacBook Air or anything else unless that use case comes in the future.
Yeah. I don't know if I would get another MacBook if something happened to mine right now, or if I would get a Mac Studio. I like both for different reasons.
Yeah.
You know, I
love them too.
I live vicariously through you. So
I think they're both amazing. The Studio has, of course, all the ports and all the power.
Yeah.
But the Air is the nice on-the-go device. But it can still do a lot of the stuff that the Studio can do, just not as capable. But rarely do I see that ceiling on the Studio.
Yeah, listen,
I
was full-fledged streaming and everything off of an M1 Air just fine, and never had a hiccup for my workflow. And I was putting it through the ringers. Like I did 2 instrumental albums worth of content that I remember would live stream, and so like I didn't hold back, and it never bottlenecked nothing. The iMac was choking out a little bit, and I wrote.
You had an iMac?
Yeah.
I don't remember this. This was probably before I listened to the tech podcast.
Were you? Refresh my memory. Were you around? Were you watching my streams when I wrote the COVID album? No. Okay. Yeah, that's when I had it.
I remember when the first one came out, and I remember you doing the second and third album songs.
Yes.
And watching them live streamed. But
so,
otherwise,
yeah, the first
I don't remember you having an iMac.
Yeah, the first one
I just wiped it out of my brain.
Waiting for the Dawn was written on the iMac, and it sometimes gave me some issues with live streaming OBS, having YouTube up and going, and looking at the chat, and having Logic and running IOs like my guitar through my preamp and my piano and things like that. I was doing all that at once, and the Intel definitely suffered. And then when I transitioned at the beginning of 2021 into the MacBook Air M1, nothing. I was skating. It was so good. So to go against Drew, I assume he would say something like, if I was Drew, he'd do something like, "Good morning. You should probably think about getting a refurbished MacBook." Drew, why would you want to do that? How's that? Is that spot on for his baloney Tim Cook?
It's hilarious because you both did Tim Cook impressions in the same podcast, but not in each other's presence.
Well,
which just shows how long you guys have been friends. I just assume he would do
that. You know, I'm mimicking him
of
doing Tim Cook. That's not my Tim Cook impression. That's my Drew doing a Tim Cook impression. Good morning. That's what he does. Mine's more energetic. Like if he had the clicker, I remember him from the. Here, I'll use my wallet. I remember him from the live actual streaming, not pre-recorded events. Good morning, Cupertino. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm so happy we could get together in person. Now, over the last couple years, we worked really hard. Yeah, mine's more. He's talking out loud live. Drew's more becoming a character of his Tim Cook. Anyway, enough of that. Assuming he said get a certified refurbished M1 Pro MacBook or find a MacBook Air. Assuming he said that, I would say that's assuming it's even available at the time of you ready to buy a MacBook. So if you can't do that, I don't see anything innately wrong with an M3. If anything, I'd say get an M3 just to future-proof it.
Yep.
That's my...
Wholeheartedly agree. And that's
stance.
something that Drew brought up as well as software updates.
Yeah.
In which then I thought, well, do I really care about software? I guess it comes down to, do you have the money for it? Or is software updates something that is... Or the features that come with the new M3 or what it's capable of. If you find those more worth it, then go for it. Otherwise... The M1 or the M2 is perfectly good enough, and you could probably find them discounted either on Amazon, eBay, wherever else, private sellers, or you can just go certified refurbished. Or you have an Apple friend or someone else like that can probably get you a discount, either or.
Shoot.
There's so many out there at this point, so I'm sure you can find one anywhere, and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. I find it interesting that we didn't have any other announcements this week. I was expecting more. And
were you expecting something like iPad or
a
new Apple TV or something?
I was expecting iPad. I was expecting iPhone. I was expecting... Actually, to be honest with you, I was expecting an event. That's what I was expecting. So, now, assuming they space it out just so we can, capitalize all of March, it would be weird if we don't get a color update just to keep the iPhone 15 alive. Like that, it's been doing that since iPhone 7. iPhone 7, dude. Oh my. That was 2016. Since 2016,
8 years ago,
there's been a mid-cycle refresh, and the iPhone 7 and 8 did Product Red, and then from iPhone 10R didn't have one. I'm thinking they didn't. Hang on. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe not. I stand corrected. 10S and 10R did not have a mid-cycle refresh. They just were there. That was 2018. They didn't do it in 2018. 2019 with the iPhone 11. Shoot, I don't even think iPhone 11 got one. Hold up. Wait. My memory. I'm doing this completely. I'm winging it off the top. iPhone 11 didn't get a mid cycle refresh either. It was just iPhone 11. Yeah. But iPhone 11 was during COVID times. So that's why. iPhone 11 was basically all of 2020 going into
right.
So that means
recall
2021 was the first time we got the mid-cycle refresh again. So actually, never mind. It's not that far-fetched to not see one, because we had 2 years back to back where they didn't. iPhone 10R and 10S, and then iPhone 11 didn't get it. Granted, I'm not going to put that one on COVID, because they could have released it at any point. COVID happened right in March, so that's the worst time to do anything like that. But I do remember 12 getting purple, 13 getting green and alpine green. Woo, my favorite. 14 got banana yellow, and then what will 15 have? Maybe nothing. Maybe this is the year that they're not going to focus on that, because they're allocating time, resource to like doing a proper iPhone upgrade with everything surrounding now Apple Vision Pro. I don't see iPhone getting dethroned by any means. Don't get me twisted on that, but I can see everything being more allocated to like what better suits the advancement of our next product category, which is Vision OS. So I don't know. I was more excited to see iPad this month, which maybe we still will. For selfish reasons, I got a 2018 iPad that I've been off and on. Like I went a long while without using it, and then I'm just trying to get back into the more digital artistic approach of things, of documenting things, and so I find my Apple Pencil and all that being very helpful. And I'm just, as an observer of the space, I'm curious what they'll do with iPad's hardware, because I never had anything bad to say about the hardware. It was always software that sucked, right? Like I mean, we meme about it all the time, but the hardware, I'm always impressed with the hardware. And so to see a new product, if the rumors are true, this next iPad is supposed to be a whole new hardware refresh. So I would be very interested to see how they go about that. I would assume they'll move the camera to instead of it being portrait, they'll move it to landscape. So that way it fits docking it on their new updated keyboard or Magic Folio case and all these things. That to me, I like seeing what the hardware can do, because maybe a part of me still believes that the hardware will lay the foundation for what the software can do later. The 2018 forward design, the one that I have right now, left a lot to be, happy with. I was like, oh, well, I'm using the iPad right now as we speak to prop up this phone on my MagSafe holder. So
that's funny.
I have, it's my MagSafe stand on top of this mic that's off frame probably for the podcast, but the mic's here. The box, it's on top of the box, and below the box, just to give it that one more little bit of an inch, I got the iPad on the bottom. So as you can see, I'm really using it.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
very much all utility possible and capability of the computational power inside of that. It does feel weird not having a mid-cycle refresh for the iPhone. I feel like a purple is due for the iPhone 15, because we got pink, which isn't red, but I'm sure Apple could excuse as red. And we got yellow, green, and blue, which is pretty much white, and black.
Wait,
So
they
I'm
got
feeling
yellow?
like
Yellow's one of them? I don't remember.
Yeah, yellow's in the 15 lineup. Yeah,
no
again,
idea.
it's all very light pastel colors.
Yeah.
So something like that could easily be looked over. Even when my wife was choosing a 15, I forgot that in that lineup was yellow.
Did she get iPhone 15?
I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, but yeah, she did.
What color did she get?
She went for blue. She was
No, you and I have not talked about that.
Oh, well, yeah, she got an iPhone 15.
Hey.
She was looking at either the pink or the blue. And I recall you saying her going pink wouldn't be her deviating from what she has right now, which is the salmon, or what she had before, which was the salmon 12.
Yes.
And I think that those words that you said and I echoed to her jived with her a little bit too much to the Apple Store, to where that flip of a coin decision biased more towards I'll go for blue.
Yeah.
Just because probably, well, not saying that your words were demeaning in any way, but it was very much I should be switching it up and making it feel a little bit
I
more
was just
fresher
going off of
and
what
newer.
she told me in regards to, like, she wants to, not repeat colors every time she would upgrade every couple years. So that was just me repeating her own words, but in a more persuasive way, I guess.
Right. You reminded her, and
Yeah.
it echoed in her brain to that very moment. And now she's got that with the was it the fabric fine woven case looking thing that's rubber on the sides or whatever.
What
and
color?
Fabric. It's also blue, but it's a darker blue, in which works with her MagSafe wallet pretty well, because that's what she really cared about. Was she likes the MagSafe wallet that you gave her.
Sweet. She's still
Thank you
using it. I'm
again.
glad. I knew
Yeah,
she
she
would put it
loves
to
it.
more use than me. I'm happy.
Yes.
It's being utilized. I'm happy. That's good.
Right. The thing with it, though, is that what she liked about her previous case, which was she went through two of them.
Right.
The old plastic, I I forget what the name of the case was, but pretty much it would deteriorate almost instantly.
It's a silicone
and it would
case.
the silicone case, yeah. It was just bad, and she had to go through 2 of them, and they're both different hues of red, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they did an update in the color later. But she wanted something just as grippy, and that's really tough when you don't want to go the silicone case. Because she didn't want her MagSafe wallet to slide off easily. And something like the clear case yellows, and then also didn't provide enough friction for the wallet. And she tried a whole bunch of others, and we landed on the fine woven one. I think it's fine woven.
Yep.
Because it provided enough friction with the fibers. And I guess we're seeing how well it lasts compared to the silicone case. And if it lasts longer, who cares what people say over the long haul if it looks ugly, like all scratched up and dirt embedded in and all that. If it did the job, it did the job.
Right.
And that's what matters. And I think it looks cool. I like the case. It's something that I would entertain for my next iPhone, whatever that'll be. But she's been enjoying it. It's been a fantastic phone for her. I think her only complaint is is it the camera? At least with her previous case, the camera cutout, the back glass versus the case were 2 very different colors of red. And she liked how it didn't blend, how it was very shouty with here's the camera and all that. With the new case, it blends in a little bit too much apparently because the lenses are big black circles and take up most of that exposed area of the camera cutout. And so I guess that's one aesthetic thing that she's not too happy about. But yes, tying it all back to what we were talking about before, it feels weird not having a mid-cycle refresh, especially from someone who's a little bit new to the Apple ecosystem. Not new as in I've never touched Apple devices in my life before. I grew up with them, but actually paying attention and actually owning them myself and not just sidelining with mom. But owning them and being cognizant of what choices Apple is making every year is definitely something like you, in my mind. I think a mid-cycle refresh should hopefully happen this month. If it doesn't, like you said, it's not technically out of Apple's DNA in regards to not outputting anything or outputting something during the springtime. But it would be nice for something to be announced with the MacBook Air, or at least get an event announced as well. I like how the animations are done in the events. I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah. I'm riding high on the Rivian event still. I know, different podcast, but I was excited that we got some Apple zhuzhed up, things happening in something this week. So I was okay just to watch Rivian do their thing. What I wanted to say in regards to, I feel like there's a bit of an elephant in the room. Let me preface by saying that. And
I remember inviting them in.
I personally feel that everything feels a bit duller for me when it comes to like anticipated. Maybe I'd say just your scheduled upgraded product lines. It became a bit dull when I know Apple is doing this all-in thing with the Vision Pro thing, and for hardware, I'm not at 100% about like, oh man, I want to see, like, yes, I want to see the iPad, I want to see a new color, just out of morbid curiosity, be like, what is it the new color going to be? Is it going to be red? Is it going to be purple? Is it going to be? Well, I feel like, can you hold on? Can you imagine if they just do white, like pure white for it? No. Sorry.
I wouldn't be mad I would just be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, what? Anyway, okay, so even though like I just want to see what they will be, I don't really care. Going back on what we talked about last week or the week before, every other week I've been thinking about it. Really, I am more curious about WWDC and what software is going to look like and how it's going to perform and how because software is the veins, it's the blood, it's everything that's pushing through the ecosystem of the hardware being then the exoskeleton. So the hardware is no good without the software at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the software can coexist really into anything. And I'm more genuinely excited about what will happen in June when it comes to the future of what we keep calling as the ecosystem. Only because I know that they are heavily focused on Vision Pro. So how does that translate to the rest of the products? That's really what I'm actually interested in. I love the UI design elements of everything. I love how intentional that they try to make these products be when it comes to, it's. I like how I said it a couple episodes ago about the Pixar effect, where it's like they're intentional about like getting at your heartstrings.
Right.
iPhones don't really do that. We've become like expected of them, almost like we're expecting a mid-cycle refresh color, right? I'm expecting the iPhone to do its thing, which innately makes it kind of boring, which is why I'm not that excited. And iPad, I'm more curious what iPad's going to look like with a new OS like design language on there. Like I'm more excited about what's about to happen. Maybe what I'm trying to say is because we have used the touch interface of swiping and everything that became a full screen product, and that design translated over to the iPad. That design is kind of in Mac OS. If you use a trackpad, you have same gestures about swiping. So all that was because of the iPhone. And we have little elements of the Apple Watch that we use. And I see it being its own thing with adopting some iOS elements into it, but it's still its own thing. Vision OS is going to change how we are interacting with our current devices that are not anything to do with Apple Vision Pro. So I am more
There's
excited.
no tactile feedback.
Yeah,
There's nothing physical that you're touching.
But imagine that then there is. Like, what if we were to use the OS in a more spatial way and the haptic engine still goes off on our phone to still simulate like a clicking, even though it's all three-dimensional. That's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm sitting here like, man, I'm more excited about what the software can entail, because how do you bridge the gap between Vision OS and everything else? Because I do guarantee that's going to happen. They did it for every other product category. It will happen. And I just don't know how. And I'm excited to see that. Software gets me more excited that way. So the fact that we don't have hardware this week, maybe we'll have it next week. And by hardware, I'm okay. We got MacBook, but like iPad, iPhone, or an Apple event, that's okay. I'm a bit dull to all the news right now. I'm more excited about what the software has been cooked up right now. But do you disagree with me?
Not at all. I'm really hoping for some decent, not retrofits, but just and maybe not a new approach, but familiar, but retro. I guess I'm going to use the word retrofitted. A familiar but retrofitted approach to the software, to where it actually feels like an update. How it felt like going from Snow Leopard to, I'm forgetting the rest
Maverick.
of the OSs in the early days. Yeah, Maverick. And maybe that one wasn't as drastic, to be fair. But
Maverick to Yosemite was the big one.
Okay. Well, then that.
Catalina
because I'm not up to date.
To Big Sur. That was even bigger. And you were around for that one. That was the biggest one, I would say. We moved away from
recall
Mac OS.
The hype of Big Sur.
We upgraded from 10, Mac OS 10. It became 11 now. And now we're like, what, on 13, 12? What are we on? I don't even know. Let me see. We are on 14. Woo! Dang.
We're getting up there with iPhone levels of numbers, which is slightly funny because you'd think it'd be other way around, where the
iPhone's catching up.
the iPhone would be catching up to the Mac OS, but not.
14.
So what I was trying to get at is that I would like a big update that was actually meaningful and isn't how Drew put it earlier in the podcast of just here's a new wallpaper and here's a new widget. Go nuts. Very much like I waited all year for this, or this is what it's like coming down to the Christmas tree and then your parents got you, I don't know, a new Nintendo controller for your GameCube. And it's like, this is great. I'm glad I got a new controller for the GameCube, but I was expecting, I don't know, a Game Boy
5?
Advance or PS5. Something that's just a little bit more substantial, less accessory, more primary. So something a little bit more in your face and also has that utility and capability that doesn't necessarily, does force you to get to know the new interface, but also you get a lot more out of it. And whether you want to dive more deep into it or if you're just going to use it the same way that you're using it before, totally fine. But having a lot more tools and a lot more nuance, or maybe not nuance is the right word, but a focus on redefinition is something that I'm looking forward to in a software update that I'm hoping we get this year.
Do you think in this software update of yours that you're looking for, do you think Apple's gonna like lean in big crazy on what we keep calling AI and they'll just call it something else?
I believe in what they mentioned it in some newsroom post or maybe some email where they actually mentioned AI up front instead of just saying we used
machine learning.
Was it
that's what
machine learning or OS or something else?
Yeah.
In one of the most recent newsroom posts, I'm trying to find it but can't find it. They outright mentioned AI, which was a bit of a surprise to me because it seemed like everyone else last year was mentioning AI. It became the new 5G. We even talked about it as well on this podcast. But Apple was the one who is trying to but avoid using that term and being a little bit more, not necessarily vanilla or friendly, but taking this new technology that has become mainstream that's been around for a while, to be honest, but the concept of AI and shaping it more around the product rather than here's a new funny widget that we added. But yeah, I do think something like a more updated AI assistant, Apple assistant, trying to avoid the S word, would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
show me the utility in it, because so far I haven't seen that much utility out of ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini.
Can I tell you a story?
Anything else
of it being useful? ChatGPT specifically.
Okay.
This is a real life
all ears.
Application. This is an applicable situation that we used it recently. Which let me also start off by saying that 85% of it was me and or my wife's doing, as it should be. Don't lean on generative text or generative anything to be your solution. Use it as a reference point, and that's what we did. I've used ChatGPT to help me spruce up some, help me concise something I'm articulating on a resume, for example. I use that all the time. But the story I want to tell you is we submitted a counter offer to an offer letter that my wife got, and I wrote out without knowing the specifics of it. I wrote like, here's a good counter, and she's like, oh yeah, and she goes, well, I want to put this in there somewhere, so she didn't put it there, and we're both sitting on like something feels clunky. The response letter feels clunky. I don't know what to do with this. And so then I jokingly was like, oh yeah, just use ChatGPT. And she was just like, and just went and grabbed her laptop and did that. And what ChatGPT was able to do, we prompted it by saying, give a proper counter offer to an application, blah, 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 blah. And everything that it spit out, I was like, oh, this is good. Ours is better though. But what we took away from it was how can we thread the clunkiness of it to make it more, fine woven, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Carrie's phone case, right? It's so how do we make it, how do we make this thing nice, or at least sturdy? So we did, and 85% of it was us, and out of that 85%, I was probably 70% me, 15% her, 15% Now I was probably 80%, whatever. The point is, I helped a lot. She helped put the context into it, because I would say something very generic, and she goes, "Oh, that's good, but it needs to be applicable to this." So then she added the flavor of of her background into it, and then ChatGPT refined it. We submitted the counter offer, and they came back with not what we were looking for, but what their cap was, and we were like, secretly we would have been fine with the other, the first one, but now we got a better pay raise, and if anything, they appreciated the steadfast of like, no, this is what I'm worth, this is my value, and they're like, we can get you to that value after some time being here with us, and then we'll transition to this other role, and with that role will come the number that you're looking for. So
it sounds like you need to throw about 5% of that additional income towards the GPT engineers then.
It worked. And that was the first time I was like, I don't know if us alone would have been able to pull that off. Maybe we would have. Maybe I'm not giving us enough credit, but it was cool that
I think it's a good tool.
It is. It's a good tool.
Great for smoothing things out. Like you said, what might be a rough rock, it can polish it into a nice skippable stone. Yeah. Capable of going a little bit further than what you either perceived or thought that only your capabilities could reach. So I agree. And that's a really cool situation. I think that's an awesome story. And I don't think I've used it in that application yet. I think the closest I've gotten is write up this for me. And then it writes it up, and I usually trash it because it's just not something I was looking for. But maybe throwing either that prompt at it like you did, or even just throwing what you guys already wrote at it and said, hey, could you add to this or smooth this over a bit, might have yielded either a better or just a different result entirely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what that path might have been.
It's good because it makes me, in general, what I like about generative text like that is that it helps me either think outside the box or get creative with what I'm trying to articulate, and also help me find the fallacies in a statement that I'm trying to produce. That it's a way I can bounce my thoughts off in lifetime to something that's not biased. I use ChatGPT in a creative sense. I was trying to come up with lyrics. I threw something at it. I didn't like it. I was like, man, no, all right. What my takeaway from this was that, all right, bounce it off and your ideas suck. I like my ideas more. I know it's trying to be human, but like, that's why I'm not worried about AI taking over like creative jobs. Like, oh, they're going to replace video editors or video creators, or it still is lacking soul. And I will say this with confidence in this whole AI fear-mongering thing about why I'm not as worried. As a creative, as somebody who creates something from nothing, the best a computer can do is mimic that, but it's not original in that sense. It mimics what a human is doing, but it's not human. when it comes to let's use lyrics specifically, just because that's the subject we were just on. A computer can't convey emotion the same way. It can give you ideas, like what at best what it does is it cuts out the middleman process of like going to a dictionary and looking for synonyms of a word that you're trying to say, which I do a lot. I'll be like, what's another word for this? If I noticed I said this one word once, and then I saw a lot of people in the last month using this word. So I was like, I think this is me doing it. I used the word cascading in a song, and now cascading has shown up in my wife's vocabulary and my friend's vocabulary. It's shown up in a lot of people's vocabulary recently, and I was like, but that's a good way of articulating something in the sense that it was trying to be used, right? And
sure,
that's finding a synonym or maybe an antonym to something. But I can't tell you how I create something, and God knows I've tried. I can't tell you the actual like inception of that thing. It's just something that happens, and I call that, for a more spiritual sense, I call that the soul. That's the soul doing its thing. It's subconscious. It's a thing that I don't really control. I'm just the vessel of it, trying to put it out there, especially when it comes to music writing. But lyrically, like I have a story. My lyrics are personal to the sense, and then I find a way to make it more ambiguous so it can be adoptable, but they are my stories. A computer does not have a story. It is making that up. It cannot be as good as an original source. All it can do is mimic or repeat. It's no different than people copying the top 40 Billboard hit. Like, there's no authenticity, or it's just redundant. A human will come up with a new pattern in chord progressions in a way that maybe hasn't been tried before in a certain sound or something. And the same with lyrics. The same with only a human can do creative choices intentionally, and then it has that much more impact to it because they can stand behind, I did it this way because XYZ. The computer is just, it's RNG. It really is just RNG, which is why when you put the same prompt in Chat GPT, I've done this before, I've gotten different results on a mathematical question. And I was like, this is not how math works.
Sounds like when the internet tries solving a math problem, that's pretty much like, hey, just follow the order of operations. Nah. I'll
RNG.
try this path this time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good at just kind of refining what we already do with Google search in a way, but it can't just full on create something. It's like saying create a new color. You can't create a new color.
Schnurple.
You're creating a new word, which is weird, but that's not a new. If you show me what that
color,
I
can visualize the color.
Yeah.
It's like a purple.
Orange. You're gonna say orange,
but
aren't you?
Nope, but it's like a silver.
There is a hex code for that. It's already existed.
You need another hex code for it. It's double hex code. It's an octocode. No, it's byte code. I don't know. Anyways,
it's like having Chat GPT it's like trying to describe a rainbow to a blind person. How do you do that?
So the atmosphere starts raining down water droplets, and in those water droplets, the visible spectrum.
They don't know what half the things you're about to say even entails.
Scientifically, it can be defined. You spurred something in my brain as a nice final thought to the ideas of what Apple Assistant and or a generative AI that Apple can bring to their ecosystem. Something that I'd like to see, and specifically I've brought this up already in the podcast, but editing this podcast or the EV podcast or any of the previous podcasts I've edited, and Drew would probably agree with this, something that's able to cut out, because there are tools for this, cutting out the dead air when someone talks, but also recognizing when someone is laughing or anything else like that. It's able to balance that correctly. And also, given that it knows the context that it's a podcast, establish a ceiling and a floor and then also compressing that audio signal appropriately so that it matches not a peaking and not a submissive or a too quiet, I guess, audio level for someone trying to communicate an idea or thought or even just sound. And having that, I guess, that knowledge or at least that logic of this should be added or this shouldn't be added. This is just random noise of typing or clicking or breathing, where this is actually an additive of laughing or anything else like that. Something like that to be added as a tool to Final Cut Pro and also Logic, any of the Pro features, would be a fantastic tool for me to use and very useful, and is most likely, I think right now, as I've rediscovered in this moment, most likely my biggest wish list item for 2024, 2025, or whenever. Anytime soon would be great, but take your time on the tool.
All right. Well, I think this concludes our Frankenstein podcast episode today.
I think it was a very interesting project. I'm very curious to see how it turns out. And if you guys liked it, please let us know in the comments or write us on Twitter or anything else like that.
Because
I'm sure Randy will see it.
And if I don't have to see him, it's bad enough I see him every day of the week on YouTube or tweeting some BS. Then I gotta sit here for hours all the time. You know what? We need a social distance even digitally. And this is it.
Makes things so much more fluid for the podcast. But,
I already know what you're gonna say. I could just do an, AIG version of Drew, and I already know what he's gonna say on everything. You could probably do something on me. There's enough.
I'm pretty sure there's someone in your Discord who's already doing that with you.
Oh, yeah.
And Drew, making AI versions of it all. I didn't listen to them, but I am very curious to see if those develop any further.
Straight up made me Sith talking the whole time as Palpatine and everything, and I'm just like, no. So then I went in yesterday and I recorded a response to it. And then it kickstarted this other thing that another friend of mine is just, he's done voice acting or doing voiceover. So then I was like, well, since I'm in this headspace, and then I did something, and now I've been going back. Anyway, this was the inception of me like starting to screw around with voice sounding things outside of just doing Palpatine all the time or Trump or whatever. So now I'm trying to do all these other little nonsense things because I didn't like how the AI bot was making me just like, how are you doing today? We should try to make the bet. And I was like, no, I don't like that because it's still not smooth transitioning because it's chopped up like, today we shall be able to try. It was kind of like that. I was like, I don't like it. So, yeah.
I think I have to go back and listen to it then.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's cool. And then watch my response to it. I had fun with it. So, anyway.
Well, I'll go check that out. And if y'all want to check it out as well, I think, Randy, your Discord's still open. If not, you can request him to let you in. With that, thanks for joining us this week. Appreciate it. Thanks for bearing with us on this segmented version of the Tech Podcast. If you want something a little bit more cohesive and most likely almost similar in length, go check out the EV Podcast as well. And we'll catch you next week. And hopefully all three of us are there at the same time. If not, we'll continue this weird digital social distancing between lovers to enemies, apparently. But with that, have a good week, y'all. Have a good day. Have a good night.
Bye.